Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. I am starting another fan fiction today that is multiple chapters. This one is only 5, so I think the first video will be chapters 1 and 2, and then the second video will be chapters 3, 4, and 5, just because I talk so much at the beginning doing the summary and stuff. So this one is called What We Lost and Found. It is by me, Beauty and the Bookshelf. It is a My Hero Academia fandom, fan fiction. The relationship is Bakugo and Kirishima. The characters that are in this story are Kirishima, Bakugo, Mina, and Denki. And some of the tags that are for this one are soul identifying marks, angst with a happy ending, post war, soulmates, alternative universe soulmates, temporary amnesia, mutual pining, emotional hurt/comfort, love confessions, first kiss, happy ending, memory loss. Kirishima Eijiro is best boy. Bakugo Katsuki is bad at feelings, and soft Bakugo Katsuki. This one has almost 4,000 words, and I'll do the summary and then the notes that I wrote for the fic. So the summary for this one is they barely had a chance before everything shattered. Now Kirishima's memories are fractured, and Bakugo's keeping secrets that threaten to push them farther apart. But maybe some bonds are too strong to be broken. So the notes that I wrote on this one were, I love writing soul identifying mark fics that don't appear until your first kiss. That holds true for this story as well. This story came from the brainstorming of another story that I wrote previously, and I decided to use both of my ideas for 2 different fics because the way that I wrote them was very different. So I do have another soulmate fic where they have soul identifying marks that came from first kisses. All right. So again, this one is called What We Lost and Found. And this is chapter 1, What We Were Before the Fall. The city trembled beneath them. Smoke curled upwards in long black fingers, clawing at the pale orange sky. From the rooftop, Bakugo could see the chaos spilling through the streets below. Cars overturned, glass glittering amid the ash, sirens howling in the distance. The war hadn't started with explosions. It had started with whispers. But by the time they realized how deep the villain network ran, it was already too late. And now this, another fight, another day that might be their last. Bakugo flexed his fingers, the sparks in his palms barely controlled. His ears rang from the last blast a few blocks over. His jaw ached. His heart was pounding too loud, and not just from the adrenaline. Behind him, he heard boots scuff the gravel. He didn't have to look. Red, he muttered. You good? Yeah. Kirishima let out a breath and then another. No, I mean, yeah, physically, but... Bakugo turned, eyes narrowing. Kirishima was already looking at him, red eyes bright even in the dim haze. His hair was mussed, a few streaks of soot across his jaw. He looked like he'd been through hell. They both had. But it wasn't the blood or the dirt that made Bakugo pause. It was the way Kirishima was looking at him, like he'd made a decision. Kirishima stepped closer. If we don't make it out of this, don't, Bakugo growled. Don't say dumb shit like that. Kirishima didn't stop. I have to. I've been trying to figure out when would be a good time, but when is there ever? He hesitated, breath shaky. I love you. Silence. It was sudden, but it wasn't a surprise. Not really. Not with the way Bakugo's chest had started to ache around him. Not with the way he never flinched when Kirishima reached for him. Never snapped when he sat too close. Never said no when he asked to fight beside him. "You idiot," Bakugo muttered, and then kissed him. It was desperate, messy, rough like everything between them always had been. But it was real. Kirishima melted into it, clutching the front of Bakugo's gear like it was the only thing angering him. Then the pain hit, a sharp burn across both of their left forearms. Not a wound, and not a weapon, a mark. Bakugo pulled back, breath-catching. His eyes flicked to Kirishima's arm. A tattoo glowing faintly through the soot and the sweat. A small blackened explosion wrapped in some unbreakable stone. His mark. Their mark. Kirishima stared at it, wide-eyed. No way. Fucking figures. Fate's a goddamn sadist, Bakugo said hoarsely. Then the ground shook again. Too close. Bakugo snapped back into motion, grabbing Kirishima's wrist. "We'll talk after. Just don't die." Kirishima grinned, that same grin that always made Bakugo feel like maybe they'd be okay. "You too, man." They jumped from the rooftop into the fray. The world went white, and Bakugo didn't see the blast hit Kirishima. One moment he was there, charging forward, teeth bared, hardening already creeping up his arms, and the next there was light and then silence. When Bakugo found him, Kirishima wasn't moving. Blood, too much of it. The medics got to him just in time. Bakugo stayed beside the stretcher the whole way to the hospital, gripping his forearm like if he let go, the mark would fade. But it didn't. It stayed, sharp and burned into his skin like truth. 3 days later, Kirishima woke up. Bakugo was in the chair next to the bed, stiff and silent, one hand curled into a fist. Kirishima blinked, wincing. "Man, these lights are brutal," he muttered, then softer. "Bakugo?" Bakugo's head snapped up. "You're awake." Kirishima tried to smile, but winced again. "Feels like I got hit by a train." "You basically did." Bakugo stood, towering over him. "You were unconscious for days, dumbass. You had a head injury, a skull fracture." Kirishima nodded slowly, then furrowed his brow. "We made it out, huh?" "Barely." A long silence stretched between them. Kirishima stared at his hands, flexing his fingers absently, as if trying to recall something. His brow furrowed, and he looked up at Bakugo, his expression tired but trying to piece things together. "Hey, were we on a rooftop before it started? You and me?" Bakugo froze, the words hanging in the air like a threat. His stomach tightened, and he couldn't help the way his chest constricted. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to explain the weight of everything they'd shared in those few moments. The kiss, the mark, the connection. "I kind of remember us talking," Kirishima continued, voice softer now, almost uncertain. "I think. Or maybe that was a dream?" Bakugo couldn't move, his jaw clenched so tightly it almost hurt. The silence felt suffocating. I can't remember what happened." Kirishima's voice was quieter now, like he was trying to hold on to something just out of reach. Did I do something wrong?" Bakugo's heart splintered, the words cutting deep. He shook his head. The movement felt stiff, like he wasn't sure how to answer. Does he even want to remember? He swallowed thickly, the sadness of it all crashing down. "You hit your head," he said. Finally, voice low, almost too casual. "Probably just mixing things up." Kirishima's eyes flickered with confusion, but then he smiled, albeit weakly, like he was trying to reassure Bakugo. "Guess so. That's just strange, you know? Like a part of me is still there, but it doesn't quite add up." There was a pause, and then Kirishima scratched absently at his forearm. Bakugo watched him, unwillingly fixating on the motion. Kirishima seemed oblivious to the heaviness in the room, but that only made it worse. Yeah, weird, Kirishima muttered to himself more than to Bakugo. Thought I had a rash or something. There's this spot. Looks like an old scar. It felt like air was sucked from the room. Bakugo's gaze snapped to Kirishima's forearm, his chest tightening. The mark, the one that had once been bright and sharp, glowing after their kiss, was faded now. The edges blurred, like it had been worn away by time and distance, like it never really existed. His own mark, hidden beneath his sleeve, felt like a brand, a constant reminder of everything that was slipping away. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. He didn't know how to respond. How could he tell Kirishima that they weren't just friends anymore, that they were soulmates, and it had been ripped away from him in a flash? Kirishima, still looking at his arm, seemed puzzled, but he didn't seem to notice the change in Bakugo's expression. Do you know where it came from? Kirishima asked casually, almost like he was asking about the scar from a training session. Bakugo swallowed the lump in his throat. Kirishima doesn't remember. He shifted, standing a little straighter, trying to mask the pain with an edge of gruffness. Probably from the fight. It doesn't matter. It was the wrong answer. He knew it. But how could he tell Kirishima the truth? How could he explain that the mark wasn't just some random injury? Kirishima tilted his head slightly, looking at Bakugo with an expression that was a mixture of confusion and concern. If it's from the fight, then why is it still there? Shouldn't it have healed by now? Don't know. Maybe it's just stubborn. Bakugo grunted, trying to play it off, but the words tasted bitter. His heart hammered in his chest. You need to rest. I'll go get the nurse. He moved to step away, but Kirishima reached out a hand, grabbing his wrist gently, and Bakugo froze. I'm serious, Bakugo. It's weird. I don't think I've ever had a scar like this. Bakugo stared at Kirishima's hand on his wrist, then at the mark that had once been their connection. His throat tightened. Kirishima was still here. They were still breathing, but it felt like a piece of him was already gone. It wasn't enough to just be here. Bakugo wanted him to remember. He needed it. But now, with the fading mark and the distance between them, he wasn't sure what was left for him to hold on to. He would carry the memory for both of them. Chapter 2. What Still Remains. 3 months passed. The city was still broken in places, but rebuilding. Heroes were back on patrol. News cycles had slowed. People were calling it the end of the war, a fragile kind of peace that had settled over everything. But Bakugo never quite let his guard down. Not when Kirishima still looked at him like nothing had happened, like the rooftop, the kiss, the mark. None of it ever existed. They'd fallen back into rhythm faster than Bakugo expected, training together, sparring, going on patrols when they were cleared. Kirishima joked again, smiled again, even teased Bakugo like old times. And Bakugo gave into it because it was easier than hoping for more, easier than explaining the truth and watching him not feel it. Some mornings, Bakugo would catch himself watching Kirishima a little too long, wondering if something would click, if the laugh would turn into a realization, if a spark would flash behind his eyes, but it never did. Still, being near him was better than nothing, and Bakugo had already decided if Kirishima was going to fall in love with him again, he wanted it to be real, not forced by a memory or a mark. They were in the gym one late afternoon, finishing cooldowns. Kirishima was still sweaty, shirt clinging to him, his hair pulled back sloppily into a tie. He grinned at Bakugo from across the mat, face flushed from the last round. Bakugo rolled his eyes and tossed him a water bottle. Thanks, bro, Kirishima said, catching it with one hand. Stop calling me that, Bakugo muttered, wiping sweat off his face with a towel. You love it, Kirishima grinned, and Bakugo didn't argue. They sat in companionable silence, the sun bleeding orange through the high gym windows. Kirishima leaned back onto his palms, stretching lazily, his tank top clinging to his chest, still damp from their cool-down laps. Bakugo, still seated beside him, still catching his breath, heat prickling across his skin. He raised an arm to wipe the sweat from his brow, and that's when it happened. The edge of his sleeve slid up just enough to glimpse a mark underneath, just a sliver of it, dark against his skin, distinct, deliberate, not a scar, not a bruise. It looked like a soul mark. Kirishima's eyes caught in the moment, flicking towards Bakugo's arm, and lingered. His expression shifted, subtle and curious. His brow drew together, eyes narrowing, slightly focused. Bakugo felt the air shift before he even looked up. He dropped his arm fast, pulling his sleeve back into place, covering the skin, covering the mark in one practiced motion. When he chanced a glance, Kirishima had already looked away, but slower this time, distracted. Neither of them said anything. But the silence changed, and Bakugo knew it wouldn't hold forever. All right, friends, thank you for listening to chapters 1 and 2. Like I said at the beginning, the next piece of the fanfiction should be the last 3 chapters. All right, so I hope that you'll join us for that next piece. See you next time.